Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm taking your questions on instrument clusters, rear brakes, timing belts, and more. This is episode 145 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, to get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com. Be sure to put question for Charles in the subject, and thank you guys so much for asking the question right at the top. Mashing the enter button a couple of times, right, like this, then giving me the whole paragraphs of details that helps me pluck the question out to get it on a show like this. Also, if you don't see your question or hear your question on these kind of shows, be sure to check the quick videos playlist on YouTube. I answer a ton more questions over there. They're really quick, one question, one answer, shot with my iPhone generally, and uploaded straight to YouTube, so they're unproduced, unedited. It's just, here's the answer to your question. Next up, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and for Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. You know, one other thing about CRP, they have a lot of other brands that you guys may be really familiar with. Brands like Pentison and Rhine and ContiTech timing belt kits and whatnot. So we're going to be talking a lot more about some of the other things that they do in future shows, especially with the GTI project. All right, with that, let's get into your questions. First one comes from Jeffrey. Hey Charles, I've been watching your YouTube channel and wanted your opinion if it's an easy fix for the LCD screen on a B5.5 Passat. The top half of the display goes bad sometimes, not always, mostly when it's been wet or raining a lot. I live in Northern Ireland, so it rains a lot. I've taken the dash out before for a leaking heater matrix. Just thought if it's best to get a new speedometer unit or fix mine. Great question, Jeffrey. So this is a problem that my Passat actually has too. And based on my research, this is what's going on. Behind that LCD screen, where it's soldered into the board, the solder actually gets loose. So you mentioned yours happens when it rains. Mine happens when it gets warm outside. Generally above like 75 to 85 degrees, the outside of the display starts getting dark and dark and dark, and you can only see like, this much of a square in the instrument cluster in that center portion. So it's to me, it's heat that actually starts to separate that solder. I've heard of guys trying to fix it. I don't know of any like easy DIY solutions. So what's going to happen is that instrument cluster is going to have to come out of the car, which is pretty easy as you mentioned. Then it's going to have to be completely disassembled. Then you're going to have to locate the source of the bad solder and resolder it. Now, I've never done that, so I can't tell you, Jeffrey, this is a really easy thing to do. Just resolder it, no problem. But I also can't tell you this is an impossible thing and that you have to replace your speedometer, which is actually the entire instrument cluster that you'd end up replacing. It's probably something that the audience may have experienced. I know there are aftermarket LCD screens that guys are installing for Audis, similar generation Audis, but I haven't found one for the B5.5 Passats. This has been a problem since like the Phaetons and before. The solution, the dealership solution, obviously, as no one will be surprised, is to put a new instrument cluster in it. But for a while, those things were like $400 or $500, and I haven't priced one out recently, so I don't know if they're still that high. That's a lot of money to get that display working again when everything else is working properly. Plus, you have to take it to the dealership to have the keys programmed, the immobilizer adapted, you can do the coding and the mileage input, but you still need it at the dealership for all that other stuff. So unfortunately, I don't think there is a really easy DIY solution. Feel free to test drive it and let us know. All right, next one comes from Keith. Just bought a 2013 Tiguan 4Motion, 25,000 miles. Friends say they're junk because of the bucket/cam. I love the car. What should I watch out for? I just changed the oil with synthetic. Should I keep it or should I get rid of it? Don't want any nightmares. Thank you. Keith, so I actually emailed Keith to clarify what he meant by bucket and cam, and my suspicions were correct. He was talking about the end of the cam, end of the intake cam, and the cam follower for the high pressure fuel pump. Keith, this is actually an FSI issue, not a TSI issue. So the Tiguan only came with the TSI in the United States. The FSI was the generation previous. The easiest way to tell is the FSI has a timing belt, the TSI has a timing chain. So on the TSI, the high pressure pumps had failures, but I'd never seen any issues with the camshaft or with the follower. Those have always been great. Again, it's just the high pressure pump that I've seen have issues there. There are other things you do want to be concerned about though on the TSI. The main ones I'm thinking are timing chain tensioner. Now you have a 2013, so you're borderline on whether it has the latest variant or not. Best thing I can recommend, check out the video I did on how to look at and check and inspect that timing chain tensioner. It's pretty easy. It'll take you about a half hour. A little challenging on the Tiguan because of the belly pan, but still worth, the maybe total 1 hour time investment to see which one you have. So timing chain tensioner failures, that'll cause catastrophic engine damage. That's number one. Intake manifold failure won't really cause any kind of catastrophic issue. It's just annoying and you'll get a check engine light. Good thing is there are warranty extensions on a lot of them. Contact your local dealership and see if you have one. Water pump failures are pretty common. I haven't seen any cause catastrophic failure, but it sure could if you drove it long enough with no coolant or overheating. So you want to make sure you keep an eye on your coolant level. The other one really is carbon buildup, and that's just a product of direct injection all around, especially turbocharged direct injection. Many other European manufacturers have the same issues, so that's something you're going to want to be aware of. You can, do the premium fuel thing, try the catch can thing, whatever you want to do there, but I would just kind of plan for it as maintenance, maybe in the 50 to 60,000 mile range. Hopefully your intake manifold fails and you can just kind of do it all at one time. That's pretty much the best thing that we want to do at the dealership is parts warranty, or warranty extension rather, the intake manifold, sell the decarb, customer saves a ton of money, we still make our time that we need to make, and it's kind of a win-win for, a sticky situation. So don't worry about the camshaft, don't worry about the follower, worry about the timing chain tensioner, worry about the intake manifold, the water pump. Tell your friends they're wrong on the problems that they have if you are so inclined to do so. I'll put links to the videos on some of the other stuff. I also did a top 5 failures of the Tiguan, and I might have done the TSI engine as a whole. I'll link that down in the description. You could check those videos out if you'd like. That'll give you a little more in-depth answer to each one of those problems. All right, next up, how does a car get into your bay? When a customer arrives, what's the process? How do jobs get assigned? Does the guy with the least work waiting get the next arrival? Or are jobs assigned based on individual tech's ability or even personality? So this is a really interesting question and completely varies shop to shop to shop. At my shop, this is how it works. Where you take your car or where you work may be totally different. But in my shop, customer comes in, checks with the advisor. Oftentimes the advisor already has a little bit of a plan for where this car is going to go. And it can be who doesn't have anything to do right now. That's usually the one that decides where it goes. Or did a certain technician order parts? Or is this a certain technician's customer and that car is going to go to them no matter what? These are all factors that play in. And it's really the service advisor's role in all of this to orchestrate it and to look through the repair orders for the morning, in the morning throughout the day, to sort of plan and strategize the day out. If I'm working on a waiter and I upsold, let's say I sold brakes on it and I'm doing the brakes on it and my next appointment comes in, someone's going to have to wait a little longer. So that's all factors that play into it. We don't have porters at my dealership, so the car physically gets into my bay by me walking up to the service drive and driving it in. Now, do they use technician skill or personality in the decision-making process of who gets a car? Absolutely. Sometimes maybe they shouldn't, but they absolutely do. If you guys have watched any of the other videos that I've done about being a new technician or getting through rough days, things like that, I talk about attitude a fair amount. And I'm going to substitute personality with attitude because a technician's attitude really does impact the work that they get. We can have the conversation of whether it should or whether it shouldn't, but the truth is that it does. If you're a complete jerk and screaming at your service advisor all the time and a good ticket rolls through, they are not going to look at you for that job first. They're going to give that job or look at someone else for that job first. And a lot of that, man, that's your fault for acting like a jerk, I guess. So that does play into it. Technician's ability at my shop doesn't really, except in very certain circumstance. So when I was a line tech, I still, even after the Touareg had kind of become a less common vehicle, I still got a lot of Touaregs. If the advisor knew this was going to be a really hard Touareg diagnosis, it usually came to me. Or a noise or a radio or a Bluetooth issue was one of the really common ones too. Charles, you know about Bluetooth, so you're going to get this car. Of course, I knew a lot about timing belts too, and that didn't work the other way, but whatever. You know, it doesn't generally work in the favor of you being good at a good job. It works in the favor of you being good at maybe a hard diagnosis or something like that. But that's just how it works at my shop. Again, every shop is different. There are pros and cons, man. There's a whole basket, right? A whole basket of things that happen that we can have a really serious, in-depth conversation of should they happen this way, shouldn't they happen this way, whose personality clashes with whom's, is it the tech's attitude, is the service advisor a jerk, is the customer a bad customer? You know, when a customer issue kind of gets elevated up, it tends to go to some of the better technicians in the shop, and that's deliberate to potentially avoid any further issues. So, all right, next up, hey Charles, would it be a good idea to do my timing belt earlier on my '07 GLI? I just hit 61,000 miles. I went stage 2 a few weeks ago and been thinking about doing my timing belt soon. Car only has 61,000 miles on it, but it's almost 10 years old. I only put 3,000 to 4,000 miles a year on it. I'm thinking of doing it next summer. Would you recommend it? Thanks, man, and keep up the great videos. Yes, absolutely. I would absolutely recommend it. You're creeping on 10 years old, man. It's time for a belt. If this were like a Mark IV or B5, I would say you're probably about 3 or 4 years past due, regardless of miles on getting that timing belt done. This is how I look at timing belts, right? This is how I look at any maintenance type job that if you miss can cause catastrophic damage. And timing belts is the #1 thing. If you miss the service and you have a timing belt break, that's catastrophic. That's internal engine damage. It is better to do that timing belt 20,000 miles too early than 1 mile too late. So your car is almost 10 years old. Time does have an impact on these belts and rollers. There's always tension on it, whether it's rotating or not, there's tension on it. So bearings can wear, belts can get weak, belts can form a memory of like being wrapped around a pulley, especially a smaller pulley. Now, it's not like the most common thing ever for a timing belt to break at low miles but high time. But you're going stage 2, so already there's more stress on the engine. Do the timing belt. In fact, I don't think I'd wait till next summer. I would do it this summer. It's a pretty easy DIY, cut and dry, nuts and bolts on, nuts and bolts off. It's not terribly expensive to get it done at a shop. In fact, at my dealership, we were calling around yesterday getting timing belt prices. Planned for like $1,300, $1,000, depending on dealership or indie shop. Found that my dealership's actually like 15 to 20 bucks cheaper than a lot of other places. So I would do it now. I wouldn't wait till next year. I wouldn't wait till next year at all. I would do it, get it done. You don't have to worry about it then. If it's a concern enough for you to send me an email about, that means it's a concern. Just get it done. You won't have to worry about it. A good example is I did my Passat's timing belt at 75,000 miles and I think 6 years. So it was 2010, 2011 when I did the belt, 75K. I'm really close to 150, and I'm probably going to do it at 150 just because then I don't have to worry about it. And you're going to spend the money anyway. If you got the money, get it done and eliminate the need for stressing out about that one thing. Because again, if that timing belt fails, you're talking catastrophic engine damage, cylinder head damage, bent valves. At the best case, I've seen pistons get chips in them from valves hitting them. So you definitely don't want that, especially if you're spinning up on stage 2 or, decide to go from there. I would get it done and never worry about it. All right, got time for one more. This one comes from Daniel. I own a 2012 GLI, and in recent days, I've noticed some brake squeal coming from the rear brakes. I took a quick look, and sure enough, my rear pads are pretty thin in comparison to the front. I've owned this car since 1,000 miles and was wondering if rear pads wearing before fronts is common on VWs. Daniel, great question. Yeah, it's totally common. In fact, if your front brakes are wearing before your rear brakes, you probably got something going on. Here's my example. My Passat, I've talked about my Passat like 5 questions today, so why not bring it into the last one, right? I have 146 something thousand miles on it, and I have replaced the front pads 0 times. Now, we're really close. It's about time for some front brakes. But I've put rear pads on it before, 1 set of rear brake pads, which is actually really good for Volkswagen. Normally, in that generation, 40,000 miles was about normal for rear brakes. And again, a lot of this depends on driving habits. If you're stop and go, we see a lot faster brake wear with people that drive in the carpool lane a lot because they're on the brake for a good portion of the time, but not fully engaged, not with the car stopped. It's, on, off, on off, light pressure, that kind of thing. So that'll wear the rear brakes a little bit faster. They are different caliper designs. That plays some part into it. I've also asked this question to Volkswagen, and the answer that I got is actually the rear brakes engage split seconds before the front. We're talking milliseconds, right? It's the rear brakes that actually touch first, and then the front brakes touch. So that's obviously going to wear the back brakes a little bit faster than the front ones. It's actually not uncommon to have rear brakes wearing 2 to 3 times before the front one. So if you're at 140,000 miles, you're ready for your first set of front brakes, you've probably put 2, maybe 3 sets of rear pads on. Completely normal, completely common. That's just how it is. Volkswagen's actually gotten a lot better. Great for drivers, bad for technicians on brakes. You know, now we're 60, 70,000 miles on rear pads instead of 30 to 40,000 miles. It's, again, great for you guys. Not so awesome for us technicians, but having more reliable cars overall is a good thing for the brand, for the drivers, and for the technicians. So that's totally normal. Don't worry about it. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, post them in the comment section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and of course right here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Drink of the day is coffee because it's early. It's 8:30 on Sunday morning, and I guess it's not time for a beer yet, but coffee's a good substitute.